My name is Nicholas Hernandez.
My name's Melissa.
My name is Jason Gullidge.
My name is Calvin Cole, and this is the Skylab Report.
The story of Skylab is a mess of accidents and complications, both mechanical and human, and it teaches us a valuable lesson about the balance of both on top of mechanical failures.
Skylab was the first and last of all American space stations to orbit the Earth. Today we have the International Space Station, but Skylab was an all-American.
We'll also be coming on to the decks of the mobile launcher at the ignition point. T-minus 20 seconds, and the countdown continues to go smoothly. Guidance release. T-minus 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. We have ignition sequence has started. 6, 5, 4, 3, 0. And we have a liftoff. The Skylab lifting off the pad now, moving up. Skylab has cleared the tower. Houston is now controlling. Mark 18 seconds.
At the time, Skylab was the second space station in outer space after the Soviet Union Salyut 1. In 1973, Skylab was set into orbit. It was one of the biggest space projects ever at that time. Skylab was meant for NASA to be able to explore space on a more direct level. The astronauts who had the privilege of working on Skylab got to observe things like Earth, solar astronomy, stellar astronomy, space physics, microgravity, biomedical and biological studies with microgravity technological research. Skylab was basically a stepping stone to today's International Space Station. Skylab was huge, measuring 35 meters long and weighing in at 90.6 tons or 199,750 pounds. This chunk of metal was the biggest made-man object in space at the time. What's even crazier is that Skylab wasn't sent into space by multiple rockets, but rather by one rocket at a time. This is what separates Skylab from its counterparts and predecessors. Skylab was outfitted with a docking port for 2 Apollo modules and had an Apollo telescope mount. It was built with a complete observatory design with its own X-ray shaped solar imaging and ultraviolet wavelength equipment. Skylab astronauts had to perform spacewalks in order to change the film in the telescope, transferring it to a lead-safe storage device. The interior in Skylab was spacious and roomy, allowed for the crew to move around freely to play or do work in the laboratory. It had a wire mesh grid that separated the interior from the living quarters from the workshop, making it the first 2-story space habitat.
On May 14, 1973, the United States launched their first space station, Skylab. "63 seconds into launch, Skylab was met with the first many problems. A small gap of less than half a centimeter between the thermal heat shield and the body of the space station allowed a pocket of air to form underneath. The resulting pressure snapped the 3 aluminum straps, allowing the shield to rip away into space. When the meteoroid shield ripped loose, it disturbed the mounting of Workshop Solar Array Wing No. 2 and caused it to partially deploy. The exhaust plume of the second stage retro rockets impacted the partially deployed solar array and literally blew it into space. The damages caused the station's power to be reduced and uninhabitable.
3 three-man crews occupied the Skylab workshop for a total of 171 days and 13 hours. Skylab missions included both rookies and veteran astronauts, including some who had walked on the moon. The crews did nearly 300 scientific and technological experiments, including medical experiments on humans' adaptability to zero gravity, solar experiments, and detailed Earth resources experiments.
The first crew would be in charge of making the station livable before they could begin on any repairs. Their first task was to deploy the solar array. They were met with frustration when a metal strip holding it down refused to give way to the communications blackout. When they emerged from it, they were in a foul mood, and venting their frustrations with a variety of four-letter words, with Houston trying to remind them that communications were up. They realized the tools they had with them that day would not work, so they abandoned the task and refocused their energy on trying to dock the spacecraft into the station. The docking mechanism also failed, and the crew was forced to depressurize the spacecraft and bypass electrical connections. The next few days, the crew worked to raise the sun shield, successfully deploy the stuck array, and begin operational work aboard the station. The incidents were frustrating for the teams involved, both in the sky and on ground. But it also proved that it was possible to fix a badly damaged space station while in orbit. The mechanical problems aside, NASA and the 3 Skylab crews were faced with another issue that came with a long-duration spaceflight. Everything ranging from planning the crew's exercise time, nutritional requirements, to scheduling came under scrutiny and debate. After the second crew finished their task much faster than expected and requested more work, they impressed NASA and set false expectations for how much a group could accomplish.
Putting people in orbit is expensive, so the mission planners tried to get as much work out of the crews as feasible, planning long and busy schedules of work. These seemed fine as planned on Earth. In practice, the astronauts discovered microgravity made everything slow and difficult. Work on Skylab often fell behind schedule.
When the third crew came around, they felt overloaded with tasks and superhuman expectations and complained about it often.
The final Skylab crew, all rookie astronauts, kept failing to complete tasks on time. They found the mission control unsympathetic and were told to work through their meal and rest times to catch up. The crew had been under a cloud from the start of the mission since they decided to conceal the fact that 2 of them had been violently space sick. Unfortunately, they had not realized Skylab was bugged and an open mic relayed their whispered plotting to mission control. Things never recovered from this frosty start, and the crew's complaints about their workload fell on deaf ears. About 6 weeks into the 84-day flight, the Skylab 4 crew rebelled, turned off the radio, and took an unofficial day off to relax and sightsee.
Some say the crew did a mutiny in orbit, while others viewed it more as a temporary refusal to do extra work. Whatever happened, however, the sour situation prompted a conference between ground and space, where the 2 sides brought their concerns to the table for a resolution. The crew and ground controllers never got that bad again, but the astronauts never flew again. We swallowed a lot of problems for a lot of days because we were reluctant to admit publicly that we were not getting things done right. It's ridiculous, but that's human behavior.
The final crew set an endurance record of 84 days living in orbit. Confusingly, the 3 missions were designated Skylab 2, 3, and 4. Skylab 1 was the original launch of the station.
What happened to Skylab? After the last crew went, they continued to orbit Earth, but it was not intended to remain derelict. NASA maintained contact with the empty outpost in hope that it would soon be brought back to life. It was still stocked with air and water. The regular space shuttle flights were expected to begin in 1977, and there was a general belief that visiting shuttle missions could easily refurbish and expand Skylab. Perhaps Skylab would have had a second life as the core of a vast and elaborate orbiting base for future exploration. Unfortunately, as we all know, the space shuttle development project was severely delayed. Worse still, Mother Nature conspired to doom Skylab. Solar activity caused our atmosphere to expand, and Skylab space station met increasing drag as it circled Earth. Its orbit was clearly decaying, and plans were made to redirect one of the space shuttle test flights to Rendezvous with Skylab to fit a rocket motor to boost it into higher orbit. Unfortunately, Skylab was predicted to fall back to Earth before 1980, and it was clear that the shuttle would not be ready in time. Its impending fate prompted rather more interest than its successful career as a research center, but not that the panic would probably see today. Here's a little bit of facts about the first U.S. space station's re-entry. Skylab floats above Earth in 1974. On July 11, 1979, the world watched as Skylab, America's first manned space station, came crashing down to Earth. Reason for the accident was that Skylab was made to go up, but not come back down. The space station, known as Skylab, was designed as an orbiting workshop for research on the effects of prolonged weightlessness on the human body. Since the project represented the next step towards wider space exploration, NASA successfully put Skylab in orbit. Unfortunately, the agency spent far less time and energy planning how to bring the space station back to Earth at the end of its mission. Even though Skylab was devised for just a 9-year lifespan, NASA failed to build in any control or navigation mechanisms to return the orbiter to the ground. Doing so would have cost too much. The administrator, Robert Frosch, said at the time, this lack of preparation showed a problem in late 1978 when NASA engineers discovered the station's orbit was declining rapidly. Skylab had become a 77-ton loose cannon.
The last crew left Skylab in February 1974, leaving the station in orbit. NASA had planned to bring more crews into orbit, but financial concerns and the run-up to the shuttle program turned attention elsewhere. An effort to send the shuttle there also fell through. Due to intense solar activity heating up the Earth's atmosphere, the station's orbit decayed faster than expected. Faced with the inevitable, NASA adjusted the station as best as possible so it wouldn't hit populated areas upon re-entry on July 11, 1979.
With the massive Skylab nearing re-entry, reactions on the ground ranged from fear to celebration, as well as commercial opportunity.
In June 1979, as the crash approached, Skylab-inspired parties and products were all the rage in the United States. The Charlotte, North Carolina News Observer reported that a local hotel designated itself an official Skylab crash zone, completed with painted targets, and was holding a poolside disco party, mocking NASA's inability to say precisely where the Skylab would land. Entrepreneurs across the country sold t-shirts with large bullseyes. Other enterprising individuals took a different tack and sold cans of Skylab repellent. After NASA's pinpointed the re-entry date as July 11, Scotland Glasgow Herald reported worried holiday makers in Devon, England are taking no chances. They plan to sit out the morning in an old smuggler's cave. In Brussels, authorities plan to sound as many as 1,250 air raid type sirens in the event Skylab rated wreckage across the Belgian countryside. And Australian youth profited handsomely from the Skylab's crash thanks to an American newspaper. Beginning in June of 1979, as Skylab's re-entry approached, many American newspapers jokingly proposed Skylab's reinsurance, which would pay subscribers for death or injuries caused by flying orbiter fragments. The San Francisco Examiner went one step further, offering a $1,000 prize to the first person to deliver a piece of Skylab's debris to its office within 72 hours of the crash. Knowing the orbiter wasn't coming anywhere near the continental United States, the newspaper felt it was making a safe bet. It didn't count on news of the bounty traveling all the way to Australia. There, 17-year-old Stan Thornton of Tiny Esperance awoke to the commotion when Skylab broke apart the atmosphere and pelted his house with space station fragments. Thinking quickly, he grabbed a few charred bits of material from his yard, hopped on a plane without so much as a passport or a suitcase, and made it to the examiner's office before the deadline. The newspapers good-naturedly paid out the award.
So it may seem odd that very few large pieces of Skylab debris reside in museums in the United States. Instead, space memorabilia enthusiasts must travel to the far-flung reaches of southwestern Australia, where several museums contain pieces of the orbiting space laboratory. The Baladonia Museum houses a pair of large pieces of sheet metal from the orbiter. One is emblazoned with Skylab in red letters, while the other piece is labeled Airlock/Danger. The Esperance Australia Museum features 2 chunks of a Skylab oxygen tank. The smaller one was dug up by a rancher in 1990. Skylab's end marked a temporary stop to NASA's work on long-duration spaceflight. However, the agency resumed long flights during the Shuttle Mir program, and these days regularly sends astronauts for months at a time on the International Space Station.